Good evening and welcome to the Sleep to Lore series. Tonight we will talk about The Mist, a chilling story set in Bridgeton, Maine, where a sudden unnatural fog envelops a small town and traps a group of survivors inside a local supermarket. If you would like to see more of these literary deep dives, please subscribe or comment below. As a new channel, every member who joins is helping to build this library of lore from the ground up. So if you want to support these deep dives, click the Join button below. Before we begin, I have a question for you. If you were trapped in a supermarket, would you prefer to be alone to make your own choices or stay with a large group of strangers for safety? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let us step into the fog. Chapter 1. The story begins in the stifling heat of a northern New England summer. The kind of weather that feels less like a season and more like a heavy, suffocating blanket. It is July 19th, and the heat wave that has gripped western Maine is finally breaking, but not with a gentle rain. It breaks with violence. David Drayton, our narrator, is living at his lakeside home on Long Lake with his wife, Steph, and their 5-year-old son, Billy. The atmosphere is heavy with a sullen stillness. The air is motionless, and the lake water sits like dark quarry stone. This is the calm before the collapse, a classic atmospheric setup where the natural world seems to hold its breath before screaming. As evening approaches, the sky transforms into a bruised canvas of black and purple. Thunderheads mass in the west like an invading army, lit from within by constant lightning. It is a display of nature's raw power, dwarfing the petty concerns of human life, such as the boundary dispute David had with his neighbor, a New Jersey lawyer named Brent Norton. We see here the immediate contrast between the trivialities of civilization, property lines and lawsuits, and the indifference of the elements. When the storm hits, it arrives with a visual anomaly that foreshadows the horror to come, a silver veil rolling across the lake. David calls it a water cyclone, a spinning teacup of destruction that turns the lake into a frenzy of whitecaps. The violence of the wind triggers a primal, protective vision in David. He imagines the large picture window shattering and flaying his family. This is a crucial psychological insight. Before the monsters appear, the first horror is the fragility of the domestic shell we build around ourselves. We think we are safe in our living rooms, but we are only separated from chaos by a thin sheet of glass. The power fails, plunging the house into the flickering, archaic light of candles. The wind sounds like a jet engine, and trees, the old giants of the forest, begin to fall. They retreat to the basement, huddled together like monks, stripping away their modern comforts, until all that remains is the family unit in the dark. When the storm passes, David sleeps and dreams. In this dream, he sees a colossal god walking across the lake, a deity so immense his waist is lost in the clouds. This entity tramples the forests and cottages, leaving destruction in its wake. But more disturbingly, the dream ends with everything being consumed by a smoke that covers the world, a mist. This dream serves as a psychic precognition, blurring the line between the subconscious processing of the storm and a genuine warning of the reality shifting around them. Chapter 2. The aftermath of the storm reveals a world altered but deceptively bright. The morning sun is crisp and autumnal, a jarring contrast to the wreckage. Trees are down everywhere, and live power lines twist in the grass like venomous snakes, hissing and spitting. David has to explain the danger to Billy, personifying the electricity as something that wants the ground, a subtle way of teaching a child that the world has become predatory. The destruction is significant. A massive old pine has crushed the boathouse, and another tree originating from Norton's property has added to the damage. Yet, amidst this chaos, the most unsettling element is the view across the lake. The opposite shore is gone. It hasn't been destroyed, it has been erased by a wall of mist. This is not natural fog. It possesses a terrifyingly straight edge ruled against the water, and it radiates a blinding, flat whiteness. It lacks the sparkle of moisture and defies the wind. It creates a sense of the uncanny, something familiar that is fundamentally wrong. David's wife, Steph, is deeply unsettled. We learn here about the local law and the influence of Mrs. Carmody, an eccentric antique dealer who deals in folk remedies and apocalyptic obsession. There is talk of a black spring, a local legend of ice turning black, suggesting that the fabric of reality in this region is thin. Steph's fear is intuitive. She senses that the mist is not merely weather. While clearing the debris, David encounters Brent Norton. The storm has leveled the playing field between them. Norton is no longer the high-powered lawyer. He is a sweaty, frustrated man whose prized Thunderbird has been crushed by a tree. They form a tenuous truce, born of shared disaster. David decides to take Billy and Norton into town for supplies. As they leave, the unease deepens. The radio is dead. It's not just static. It's a void. David tests the frequencies and finds that the stations in the direction of the mist are gone. This silence brings up the spectre of the Arrowhead Project. Local rumors, fueled by old Bill Giusti, suggest a government installation in the woods is conducting experiments, atom stuff, or perhaps something even more esoteric. This introduces the technological anxiety of the Cold War era, the fear that men in white coats, meddling with forces they don't understand, have finally broken something they cannot fix. They arrive at the supermarket in town, which is operating on emergency power. It's a scene of mundane breakdown, no air conditioning, long lines, cashiers using calculators. It creates a false sense of security. People are annoyed, not terrified. They are worried about melting ice cream, not the end of the world. David tries to call Steph from a payphone, but the line is dead. It's a moment of severance. As he stands in the sweltering heat of the parking lot, watching the ordinary frustrations of a small town without power, a heavy sense of dread settles in. He realizes too late that leaving the house was a mistake. The mist is not just a weather phenomenon. It is a curtain being drawn across the world, and he has just stepped onto the wrong side of it, leaving his wife alone in the darkness that is to come. Chapter 3. The supermarket becomes the last bastion of the known world. Inside, the atmosphere is a cocktail of humid agitation and mundane frustration. David and his son Billy navigate the aisles, pushing against the current of summer tourists and locals alike. It is a perfect snapshot of everyday life, petty grievances over the price of cold cuts, the scarcity of bacon, and the quiet judgment between year-round residents and the vacationers just roughing it. There is a deceptive normalcy here, the kind Stephen King excels at constructing just before he tears it down. David secures a bottle of wine, a small, hopeful anchor for a future romantic evening that will likely never come, while the background hum of a generator signals the fragility of their situation. The air conditioning fails, and the heat begins to rise, a physical manifestation of the mounting pressure. Tensions flare in the checkout lines, not over monsters, but over wait times and frozen food thawing. It is the banality of evil's little brother, the banality of inconvenience. But the mist is coming. The first warnings are auditory. A siren shrieking in the distance, a fire whistle winding up to a desperate scream. It triggers a primal alertness in Billy, who clings to his father. The outside world is beginning to fray. A teenager bursts in, breathless and shouting about the fog consuming the road. He is the herald of the uncanny. But the crowd's reaction is a study in human denial. They clutch their carts, they refuse to lose their place in line. The disruption of their routine is more immediate than the existential threat looming outside. But curiosity draws some to the windows, and then the panic begins to crystallize. Mrs. Carmody, a local eccentric whose religious fervor usually garners eye rolls, suddenly shifts from a nuisance to a dark prophet. She screams that it is death to go out there. In a civilized society, she is easily dismissed as a bag lady or a zealot, but as the structures of logic collapse, her voice gains a terrible weight. A man staggers in with a bleeding nose, screaming that something in the fog took his friend. The abstraction of weather is replaced by the specificity of predation, and then the visual reality hits. The mist arrives not like weather, but like a physical wall, white, bright and solid. It devours the landscape with a lazy, hypnotic speed. It doesn't obscure the world, it erases it. The blue sky is painted over with a blank canvas of terrifying potential. The parking lot vanishes. The cars vanish. The psychological break occurs now. A panic, not quite a stampede, but a desperate flight ensues. People rush into the white void, ignoring the warnings. They are driven by the inability to process the unknown. They choose the danger of the fog over the trapped safety of the store. Screams echo from the whiteness, sounds that are abruptly, surgically cut off. We see a man jerked upward, not running into the mist, but being pulled by something unseen. The lights in the store die, plunging them into gloom, and the only illumination comes from the sodium lights outside, turning the mist into a glowing, impenetrable ocean. The reality of their confinement sets in. They are no longer shoppers. They are survivors in a glass cage. Chapter 4. The narrative shifts from the collective panic of the showroom to the claustrophobic terror of the back rooms. David takes Billy to the back near the meat coolers, trying to shield his son from the hysteria. It's a paternal instinct, overriding his own fear to act as a stabilizer for the boy. Once Billy sleeps, succumbed to the exhaustion of shock, David ventures into the storage area. Here the sensory landscape changes. It is dark, smelling of diesel fumes and raw fear. The generator has failed, choked by a blocked exhaust pipe. In the silence of the storage room, David hears it for the first time, a sound that doesn't belong in a supermarket. It is a slithering, wet, scraping noise. It plays on our deepest evolutionary fears, the sound of a predator stalking in the dark. He tries to warn the others, Ollie Weeks, the store manager, and a few local men, Jim and Myron, along with the bag boy, Norm. This scene perfectly illustrates the fatal flaw of human arrogance. The men, specifically Jim and the young, confident Norm, dismiss David's warning as nerves. They cling to the mechanical problem of the generator because it is solvable. It is a man's job. Fixing a machine makes sense. A monster outside does not. Their dismissal of David is a rejection of the supernatural in favor of the rational, a decision that proves fatal. They decide to open the loading bay door to clear the exhaust pipe. It is an act of supreme folly. As the corrugated steel door rattles upward, the mist spills in, thick and cold, smelling of ancient seawater. And then, the unknown reveals itself. Tentacles, not one, but many. They slither over the loading dock, slate grey on top, flesh pink underneath, lined with pulsing, hungry suckers. They are grotesque, biological impossibilities that defy terrestrial biology. One wraps around Norm's leg. The horror here is visceral. It is not a quick death. It is a tug of war. David grabs Norm, trying to haul him back, but the physical strength of the creature is overwhelming. The imagery is nightmarish. The tentacles stretch like rubber. The suckers corrode the skin and eat into the flesh instantly. Norm is dragged out, screaming, his fingers leaving bloody streaks on the concrete. The other men, Jim and Myron, freeze. Their worldview has shattered. They are paralyzed by the thanatotic avidity, a drugged fascination with death. They cannot process that they are no longer at the top of the food chain. David, acting on pure survival instinct, eventually abandons the impossible rescue to save the living. He hits the button to close the door. The machinery descends, severing a tentacle that flails on the concrete like a landed fish, spraying black ichor and acidic blood. The severed limb dissolves into the mundane clutter of toilet paper and dog food. The aftermath is a grim awakening. Norm is gone, consumed by the white nothingness. Inside, the dynamic has permanently shifted. David, fueled by adrenaline and rage, punches Myron. Violence has entered the room, no longer a taboo, but a necessary tool for survival. The social contract is void. They are no longer neighbors or co-workers. They are witnesses to a new, hostile reality. Ollie and David stand in the dark, shaken. They share a terrifying realization. The creatures are not just outside. They are searching for a way in. And worse, they realize the fragility of the group in the main room. If they tell the truth, panic will ensue. If they say nothing, people will die. They are burdened with the knowledge of what lies in the mist. Giant, unearthly things that make human concerns feel microscopic. The world hasn't just ended. It has been replaced. Chapter 5. Time in the federal foods market had become fluid, stretching and warping under the weight of the impossible. David Drayton checked his watch to find it was only 12:15. Mere minutes had passed since the incident at the loading dock, yet it felt like hours. This distortion of time is a hallmark of trauma. The mind struggles to process a reality that has fundamentally shifted, making every second of survival feel like an eternity. Was battered, his face swelling from his earlier panic, his arrogance replaced by a primal, shaking fear. They agreed to support David's story, not out of bravery, but out of a desperate need for someone else to take the helm. The immediate danger wasn't just outside. It was the fragility of the glass front of the store. The realization hit them collectively. If the mist harbored creatures capable of dragging a boy away, plate glass offered no more protection than a soap bubble. David went to find Brent Norton, hoping to enlist his authority to calm the crowd. He found his neighbor engaging in a surreal tableau of normalcy with the store manager, Bud Brown. They stood amidst the frightened shoppers, discussing the unauthorized beer consumption in the back as if it were the most pressing issue at hand. It creates a striking image of cognitive dissonance. When faced with an incomprehensible threat, the human mind often retreats to the comfort of mundane rules and regulations. Brown was more terrified of corporate policy violations than the eldritch horrors outside. David tried to explain the death of the bag boy, Norm. He detailed the tentacles, the blood, the sheer alien nature of the attack. But Norton's mind snapped shut like a steel trap. He refused to believe. To Norton, this wasn't a warning. It was a personal slight, an elaborate prank orchestrated by a local who resented him. He projected his own insecurities and past legal grievances onto the situation, choosing to believe in a conspiracy of Hicks rather than accept that the laws of nature had broken down. The argument escalated into a physical altercation. Norton, screaming about his heart condition and his status, was dragged by David toward the back room. He refused to look. His denial acting as a psychological shield he dared not lower. Ollie Weeks, surprising everyone with a quiet, lethal intensity, intervened against the store manager, Brown. Ollie, the soft-spoken assistant, was beginning to undergo a metamorphosis into the group's most pragmatic survivor. Since Norton refused to witness the evidence, Bud Brown was forced to go. In the gloom of the loading dock, amidst the scattered inventory, Brown saw the severed tip of a tentacle. When prodded, the flesh writhed with impossible vitality. The reality was undeniable. Brown, the rigid rule follower, stared into the abyss of the unknown. His retreat was immediate. He acknowledged the horror, but even then, he couldn't fully abandon his role, obsessively worrying about the store's liability. The group returned to the main floor, the silence of the witnesses speaking louder than any scream. The seed of terror had been planted, and the fracturing of the survivors was about to begin. Chapter 6. The following hours in the market were a study in human sociology under pressure. The survivors splintered into tribes, each adopting a different coping mechanism to deal with the encroaching dread. First, there was the Flat Earth Society, led by Brent Norton. This group clung to denial as a life raft. They rationalized the tentacles as a hallucination or a hoax, sitting apart from the others, isolating themselves in a bubble of false normalcy. It is a tragic psychological defense. By rejecting the reality of the danger, they stripped themselves of the ability to survive it. Then, there was the rise of the irrational. Mrs. Carmody, a local eccentric, began to preach, clad in her bright canary pants, a grotesque contrast to her grim prophecies. She declared this the end times. She spoke of the Black Spring and demanded a blood sacrifice. While she was initially silenced, slapped by a tourist who represented the last gasp of civilized decorum, her influence was festering. In the absence of logic, superstition rushes in to fill the void. The mist didn't just obscure the world outside, it eroded the moral structures inside. The third faction was the pragmatists, led by David, Ollie, and a newcomer named Dan Miller. They moved from panic to fortification. Realizing the glass was a liability, they began stacking bags of fertilizer and dog food against the windows, leaving small loopholes for observation. The banality of the barricades, lawn food, and kitty litter underscored the desperate, improvised nature of their defense. They took inventory of their weapons. There were no flamethrowers, only mop handles wrapped in cloth and dipped in lighter fluid. Medieval torches against a sci-fi threat. However, the balance of power shifted when Amanda Dumfries revealed she was carrying a pistol. She surrendered it to Ollie Weeks. Ollie, the unassuming target shooter, accepted the weapon with a calm competence that unnerved the store manager. The gun was a symbol that the old laws were gone. Authority now belonged to those who could pull the trigger. As evening approached, the mist outside darkened, not with night, but with a suffocating gloom. The tension inside reached a breaking point. Norton and his small band of skeptics decided to leave. They announced they were going out to get help, a euphemism for escaping a reality they refused to accept. It was a suicide pact born of stubbornness. David, unable to stop them but desperate for data, convinced a man in Norton's group to tie a clothesline around his waist. It was a final tenuous link between the safety of the market and the unknown void. The scene that followed is a masterclass in sensory horror. Norton and his 4 followers stepped out the door and were instantly swallowed. They didn't fade into the distance. They simply ceased to be visible, the whiteout conditions erasing them from existence mere feet from the threshold. David stood at the door, feeding the line through his hands. He felt the man walking, the rope paying out smoothly. It went 10 yards, 20. Then it stopped. The silence of the mist was absolute, a heavy damp blanket that muffled the world. Suddenly, the rope jerked. It wasn't a tug of communication. It was the violent thrashing of prey caught in a snare. The line whipsawed across the doorframe, burning David's hands. Then came the screams. They were human, filled with a realization of horror that had come too late. But the screams were cut short, replaced by wet, tearing sounds and a guttural, animalistic grunting that vibrated with predatory power. The rope went slack. David pulled it back in. The act was heavy with dread, a fisherman reeling in a message from hell. When the end of the clothesline crossed the threshold, it was no longer white. It was stained a bright arterial red. The end had been sheared off, frayed and chewed. Mrs. Carmody's voice rang out in the stunned silence, screaming, "Death!" It was no longer the raving of a lunatic, but the verdict of the new world. The door was slammed shut, sealing the survivors in with their fear, the blood-soaked rope lying on the floor as the only testament to the fate of the flat earthers. Logic had walked out into the mist and died. Now only survival remained. Chapter 7. The descent into night brings a surreal juxtaposition of the mundane and the horrific. Inside the federal supermarket, the air grows thick with the scent of barbecue chicken, Mr. McVeigh, clinging to the only routine he knows, cooks for a crowd that has lost its appetite. It is a desperate attempt to impose order on chaos. But as David notes, the mind is a monkey. It swings wildly from the comfort of cooking poultry to the sheer terror of their entrapment. David tries to feed his son, Billy, but the boy is physically shrinking under the weight of the trauma. A heartbreaking sight that underscores David's helplessness as a father. Outside, the mist is no longer a static white wall. Ollie Weeks, whose sobriety has sharpened his observation, notes dark, bruising smudges moving within the fog. The ecosystem of the mist is waking up. When true darkness falls, the plate glass windows transform into a theater of nightmares. A scream pierces the store as a creature lands on the glass. It is a biological absurdity, a pink, segmented insect, reminiscent of a creature from a Hieronymus Bosch hellscape. It looks almost comically like a cheap rubber toy until its stinging apparatus and bulbous eyes reveal a lethal intent. The horror escalates when the predators arrive. Albino, pterodactyl-like birds swoop from the gloom to feed on the insects, shattering the fragile barrier of the window. The store erupts into pandemonium. Tom Smalley, a bag boy, is pinned by a falling sack of fertilizer, and one of the avian monstrosities descends upon him. The scene is one of primal brutality, stripping away civilized veneer in seconds. David, acting on adrenaline, fashions a torch, and with the help of a lighter, he sets the beast ablaze. It becomes a screaming, zigzagging comet of fire before crashing into the pasta aisle, a grotesque mixture of charred bone and spaghetti sauce. Amidst the panic, Mrs. Repler, an elderly teacher who looks as tough as beef jerky, engages in chemical warfare. Wielding 2 cans of Raid like a gunslinger, she proves that survival isn't about physical strength, but adaptability. She sprays the invading insects to death, buying the survivors a moment of reprieve. In the aftermath, the psychological toll becomes evident. David finds himself connecting with Amanda Dumfries. It is not romance, but a shared, desperate need for human contact in the face of oblivion. In the quiet hours, David reflects on his past as an artist, contemplating the curse of expectation and his acceptance of being merely good enough. This introspection reveals a crucial theme. In the mist, ego and ambition are meaningless. Survival is the only art form that matters now. Chapter 8. The darkness holds secrets far worse than the creatures outside. In the dead of night, Ollie wakes David and leads him to the cold storage area. Here, the horror shifts from the supernatural to the tragic human cost of the event. Hanging from the pipes are the 2 young soldiers, mere boys from the local base. It is a double suicide. Their tongues protrude in a grim mockery of laughter, and their hands are bound behind them, a testament to their determination to die. This discovery confirms the darkest rumors. These boys knew the truth about the Arrowhead Project. They knew that the government experiments had likely punched a hole through to another dimension, unleashing this hell. Crushed by guilt and knowledge, they chose the rope over the mist. David and Ollie make a tactical decision to hide the bodies behind stacks of dog food. They understand that panic is as deadly as the monsters. The group's sanity is already hanging by a thread, and this revelation would snap it. Seeking a moment of oblivion, David and Amanda retreat to the manager's office. Their intimacy is frantic and raw, Eros fighting Thanatos. It is a biological imperative to affirm life in the shadow of death. Morning brings a flat, bleaching light, but no relief. Dan Miller, a pragmatist among the panicked, sits with David to discuss a strategy. Miller identifies a new internal threat, the fracturing of the group. There are the catatonic, the denialists, and most dangerously the flock gathering around Mrs. Carmody. The local eccentric is rapidly transforming into a high priestess of doom. Miller recognizes the psychological mechanism at work. As the structures of civilization crumble, the irrational and the fanatical become seductive. Mrs. Carmody is offering answers written in blood, and her influence is spreading like an infection. Miller proposes a test, a reconnaissance mission to the pharmacy next door. It is a terrifying calculus. The mist might hide precipices where the parking lot used to be. The cars might be vaporized. But the alternative is waiting for the glass to break again, or for Mrs. Carmody to demand a human sacrifice. David agrees to the plan. They are walking a tightrope, caught between the eldritch monsters outside and the descending madness within. Chapter 9. The psychological toll of the mist is nowhere more evident than on the face of a child. Billy Drayton, once a vibrant boy, has begun to wear the mask of an old man, his features eroding under the high-voltage stress of unceasing terror. It is a phenomenon often seen in war zones. The adaptability of youth is a double-edged sword, allowing them to survive but scarring them fundamentally. While Billy regresses, seeking the comfort of his father, the adults are forced to make impossible tactical decisions. A new expedition is formed, not to fight, but to scavenge. It is a mission of mercy for the injured Mrs. Clapham, yet it feels like a funeral procession. 7 souls, including the mild-mannered assistant manager Ollie Weeks and the formidable elderly teacher Mrs. Repler, arm themselves with makeshift weapons, a tennis racket bug spray, a broom handle. It is a pathetic arsenal against the unknown, highlighting the absurdity of their situation. As they prepare to step out, Mrs. Carmody, the town's eccentric-turned doomsayer, seizes the moment. She predicts death, her rhetoric shifting from warnings to curses. She is no longer just a frightened woman. She is becoming an avatar of the chaos, feeding on the fear that paralyzes the others. When she is silenced by a projectile can of peas and Amanda's sharp rebuke, it breaks her spell only momentarily, a fragile pause in the sliding scale of sanity. The group steps into the white opacity. The mist operates as a sensory deprivation tank, nullifying sight and distorting sound, forcing the creatures within it to hunt by smell. This biological imperative becomes the survivors' only tactical advantage, though they don't fully grasp it yet. They cross the 20 feet to the pharmacy, a journey that feels like miles. The sanctuary of the market is left behind, and they enter a place of slaughter. The pharmacy has become a tomb, its doors foolishly left open to the mist. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of death and something sweeter, more cloying. It is festooned with what looks like crepe paper, but is actually thick, white webbing. The horror here is distinct from the tentacled violence seen earlier. This is the lair of the spinners. The realization hits David too late. These are not merely webs, but acidic traps. Disaster strikes with the speed of a bullwhip. Ethereal white strands drift from the fog, burning flesh on contact. The group is besieged by spiders the size of dogs, creatures that defy terrestrial biology with their pomegranate-colored eyes and surreal physiology. The expedition disintegrates into chaos. Men are snatched away, wrapped in burning silk, or pierced by the corrosive threads. It is here that the quiet competence of Mrs. Repler shines. She battles the monstrosities with bug spray and a tennis racket, a surreal image of civilized order fighting primal chaos. Ollie Weeks, displaying a hidden reservoir of steel, uses Amanda's gun to drive the creatures back. They retreat to the market, but the cost is high. They leave behind the dead and the doomed, returning with nothing but the grim knowledge that the insects are evolving, and the sanctuary is under siege. Chapter 10. Time inside the market blurs, the hours marked only by the growing shadow of fanaticism. As the physical threat outside intensifies, the social contract inside collapses. Mrs. Carmody's influence spreads like a contagion. In the absence of technology and traditional order, humanity reverts to blood cults. It is a terrifying sociological pivot. When the lights go out, the dark gods return. She speaks of the end times and expiation, concepts that offer a twisted logic to the senseless horror. If the mist is a punishment, then it can be bargained with. David awakens to find that the balance of power has shifted. The rational thinkers are dwindling, either dead or exhausted, while the terrified masses are drawn to the certainty of Carmody's madness. She demands a sacrifice to clear the sky. The most chilling defection is that of Mr. McVeigh, the butcher. A man who has spent his life cutting meat has now, under the pressure of cosmic horror, applied his trade to the concept of human slaughter. He stands with Carmody, a silent executioner awaiting orders. David realizes that staying means death, not by the claws of monsters, but by the hands of neighbors. He devises a desperate plan based on the theory of scent. If they can move fast enough in a sealed car, the creatures might not detect them. He recruits a small circle of trust: Ollie, Amanda, Mrs. Repler, and a few others. They aim for a pre-dawn escape, hoping to slip away while the zealots sleep. But the zealots do not sleep. At 5 a.m., as the group moves toward the exit, they are intercepted. Mrs. Carmody blocks their path, glowing with a terrible yellow-clad vitality. She has fully shed her humanity, demanding the boy Billy and his whore protector Amanda as offerings to the mist. The mob surges forward, ready to tear them apart. It is the final confrontation between the remnants of civilization and the new savage law. Ollie Weeks makes the ultimate choice. There is no reasoning with the mob, no talking down the high priestess of the apocalypse. He raises the gun and shoots Mrs. Carmody in the stomach. The violence is shocking, freezing the crowd. The spell breaks, not through logic, but through the brutal reality of a gunshot. With the false prophet dead, the mob's focus shatters, allowing David and his group to slip out the doors. They leave the human monsters behind, stepping straight into the domain of the real ones. Chapter 11. The escape is frantic and costly. The transition from the market to the car is a matter of seconds, yet it claims the life of their protector. Ollie Weeks, the man who held the line, is seized by a creature from a nightmare, a massive, lobster-clawed entity that bifurcates him in a single, gruesome motion. His death serves as a brutal reminder of their insignificance. Heroism grants no immunity in the mist. Panic nearly claims them all. Amanda freezes, paralyzed by the screaming void, until Mrs. Repler, the indomitable disciplinarian, slaps her back to reality. They scramble into David's scout. The theory of scent is tested immediately as a spider descends upon the vehicle. It seeks them, its legs rasping against the metal, but as the engine roars to life and the doors seal, the creature loses interest. They have become ghosts to the mist's inhabitants. David drives into a world erased. The journey back to his home is a slow crawl through a grey limbo. The landscape has been altered, the road cracked by earth tremors, the familiar geography rewritten by the arrival of this other dimension. When they finally reach the turnoff to his home, the path is blocked by fallen trees and the sounds of massive, unseen things crashing through the woods. David is forced to make the silent, crushing realization that he cannot save his wife. The life he knew is gone. Only the survival of his son remains. They turn south, navigating a ruined world. The silence of the radio bands confirms the scale of the disaster. There are no emergency broadcasts, only static. The mist has dampened all signals, isolating them completely. As they drive along the turnpike, they encounter a creature that shatters the limits of human comprehension. It is a behemoth, a thing of such staggering size that its legs vanish into the clouds, its body a moving mountain carrying its own ecosystem of parasites. This moment crystallizes the cosmic horror of their situation. They are not fighting an enemy, they are ants under the feet of gods. The novella does not offer a Hollywood resolution. There is no sudden sunshine, no military rescue. They drive until the fuel runs low, stopping at a deserted restaurant. The future is a blank page. David writes his account, leaving it as a testament to their existence. In the depths of the night, tinkering with a multiband radio, he hears, or perhaps hallucinates, a single word through the static: Hartford. It is a fragile, tenuous thing. 2 syllables that might be a destination or a cruel trick of the mind. But David clings to it. He whispers 2 words to his sleeping son, words that serve as a shield against the encroaching dark. One is the name of a city, the other is hope. In the face of an absolute, overwhelming abyss, the refusal to surrender is the only victory left.